And, moving away, I thought about it, but I was like, no, I really want to go on the road. That's what I want to do.
Hmm.
And I started going on the road with the Klezmer All Stars, and then started going on the road with Galactic, and I was touring with both of them. Then I had to make a choice, and I went with Galactic, and then here we are, 27 years later.
Yes, what was that? That was around what, 94, 95?
So we started touring in '96.
Okay.
Robert Mercurio and Jeff Rains and I started playing together in in 1992.
Hmm.
So 30 years ago. And then in '94, we transitioned from Galactic Prophylactic to Galactic. And then we recorded a record in '95, released it, and started touring in '96.
Gotcha. Why'd you change the name? Was there any specific reason?
Well, we knew that it was a juvenile name, and we got asked to contribute a track for this compilation called Is That Jazz for Ubiquity Records out of San Francisco. And they were like, we're not putting that name on this record. And we couldn't think of another name, and the deadline was up. So they just put Galactic on the record. And
Hmm.
we're like, oh, guess our name is Galactic now.
And where were you guys touring early on? Like all around, all over the country? Were you going overseas?
So we started touring the country. We knew that we wanted to not be like just a regional band.
Hmm.
So we got our record finished, we started sending copies of it to clubs, and we would call friends of ours and say what club should we play, right? Like, what's like a 200 person club, and we were only drawing like 50 people if we were lucky in the beginning, sometimes less, a lot less than that. And
Hmm.
then so we booked our first. Robert Mercurio started calling these clubs, our bass player, and we booked our first gig in Vancouver, Canada.
Hmm.
I think the place was called like the Chameleon Club or something. And then we filled in the trip with two gigs in Colorado. So we drove 24 hours in my parents' 1978 Econoline van, 24 hours straight, taking turns. Played two gigs in Colorado, then drove 24 more hours to get to Vancouver.
Hmm.
And then we spent 5 weeks coming down the West Coast.
Gotcha. And what on at?
Sometimes we would have as much as 5 days off because we couldn't get a gig between Seattle and whatever the next place was. But but we would do that, come home for a few weeks, then go on the East Coast
Hmm.
for a month or more, come home for a couple of weeks, then do the West Coast. So we were doing each coast 4 times a year.
Gotcha. And
So that was a 3 month cycle. West Coast, home, couple weeks, East Coast, home, couple weeks, repeat. And we would do that, for 3 months. We would do those three month cycles like 4 times a year for the
okay.
first couple of years.
Early on, what was your take home like in terms of money in those early tours? Were you making really much at all?
No, no, we would all come home and I would play gigs. Some of the other guys had other jobs, like Robert was a waiter. Jeff Rains worked at a music store. Rich Vogel played on Bourbon Street. So, we were just doing different gigs when we would come home. And I remember one gig after our like, I don't know, second or third time playing playing in Vail, Colorado, being at the band condo, and Robert Mercurio handing each one of us a $5 bill. Well, guys, this is what we made tonight.
That's got to be discouraging.
Yeah, and I would buy cans of soup and a loaf of white bread,
So,
and like eat eat soup and white bread in the back of the van. Yeah, I mean it was It was pretty slim in the beginning.
How long did it take before you guys were really starting to get to the point where it's like, okay, now this is a real job. I'm actually,
Yeah.
I can go and
So
eat real foods.
yeah. So it took 4 years of relentless van touring for us to get to where we were then in a bus and headlining places like the Warfield
hmm
in San Francisco, which holds 2,500.
hmm
And I think we were still playing Irving Plaza, which holds about 900 or so. But we eventually worked up to Terminal 5 and played that a bunch, which holds like 2,500
hmm
in Manhattan.
And then
Um,
what year roughly was that?
that was like 2000.
hmm
And then September 11th happened, and that put a dent in attendance. People took, some people got really leery of traveling and coming out. And so that kind of curtailed attendance for a little while.
hmm
And then things built back up, and then, and now COVID is like a whole nother world.
For
But,
sure.
but, now we all own homes and are putting the kids through college. Um, so, but you've got to start somewhere. And, my advice to people, just start. You just got to start,
hmm
you know. And we started calling clubs ourselves, and we started driving my parents' 1978 Ford Econoline van, same van that I went to Disney World in when I think I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, something like that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I might have been 8 because they might have had the van for 2 years by the time that we went
hmm So like,
to Disney World.
how did you find reception was for Galactic's music, especially early on? Because obviously in New Orleans, it's like funk band makes perfect sense. But I guess in places like New York, LA, stuff like that. But going, other like maybe smaller towns, what was that reception like?
Yeah, it was good. What would happen was we might have 20 people at a show, right?
hmm
But we played like we were playing Madison Square Garden. We played like we were playing a Saturday night at Tipitina's,
Yeah.
right? So we knew what that was to have tips on a Saturday night. So we would play for 20 people like that every night. And then those people were so stoked, they would tell their friends, and then they would come back, and the next time it might be 50 people, and the next time it might be 150 people,
hmm
right? So it grew pretty steadily for those first 4 years. I mean, we went from playing 20 to 50 people on our first tour to 2,500 in San Francisco by the fourth year.